Well, this particular video is with regards to the first two chapters about communication in general and also culture. These two chapters really are the overall picture of the communication process. As you learned in the first chapter, communication is, it's part of our everyday life. No matter what we're doing, we're potentially communicating. But the thing to remember is the transactional model, in that the everything that we do is we're both sending and receiving information. This is so important. This is, really important, because what happens so often in interpersonal communication, interpersonal relationships, is that we think communication is one way. And so if I'm speaking, it doesn't matter how I'm doing it or what I need to do. I just need to think about myself, right? But that's the whole point of communication. To be effective, you have to understand, appreciate, and monitor all, that the other person is sending messages even while you're talking, which is why face-to-face communication is so much richer than social media. As I sit here talking to you via social media, right? It's not that social media doesn't work. It's just that in face-to-face it's much more powerful, because you can pick up those immediate messages. When I'm looking at you, if I'm speaking, I should be looking at your face and picking up, messages that, you understand me, you don't understand me, something that I said just hurt your feelings, you like what I say. All of these things we have to be aware of, and that's something that is hurtful and totally ineffective in many of our communications, because we don't take that into account. And that's true in any form of communication, whether it is public address, mass media, talking to the millions, or especially face to face. It's the same process, just the variables change quite a bit. So what I want you to come away with chapter one is that, number one, we communicate for different reasons. We have practical reasons. We have health reasons, physical reasons, etc. There's always a reason why we communicate. All right. We don't communicate randomly. As we get further into the other chapters, you'll understand a lot more why. But we do not communicate randomly. There's always, if nothing else, a subconscious connection to what we're doing. And so when you and I are both communicating, it may be that I'm coming from a physical level and you're coming from a social level, and so we might be interpreting each other's positions very differently. Understand that this is very vague right now. The first two chapters are very general overviews, okay? And so these following chapters, as you'll find, they are much more specific. They take part of this whole picture and really research it. So what I want you to come away with chapter one is, number one, that it is transactional, meaning that we both send and receive at the same time, that we are both responsible for the outcome. Communication, the root word is communis, the Greek word communis, which means shared. And so communication isn't the act of sending and receiving, it's the outcome. How much do we have commonality in what we understand? And so obviously there are levels of effectiveness and not. So that's the first thing, the transactional model. Again, we both send and receive simultaneously. We are both responsible for the outcome. If it's a bad outcome, we've both got, some responsibility for it. If it's a good outcome, we both have responsibility for it. It may not be 50-50, but it's not 100% to zero. Secondly, the needs. We have multiple needs for why we communicate. And those needs are what motivate us and how it does affect our communication. And by understanding these different needs, it may help you understand why you communicate the way you do, but also understand that other people they're coming from a need as well, and they may not be the same need at the same time as you. So, transactional model, we have needs, and that relationships are defined by the quality of the communication between the two people. It's very important. The quality of the relationship is defined by the quality of the communication. So, in your heart and in your head, you may be thinking, I love this person. This person's an equal to me. And, it's an honest, open relationship. But if the predominant pattern is deceitful, if it is hateful, if it's put downs, that is the reality of the relationship. So if you want an open, honest relationship, you have to communicate in open and honest ways. Now, does that mean every moment, every day? Well, that would be wonderful, but it's not realistic. Right? And so you look at the patterns, the overall predominant patterns in a relationship. Even the best of relationships have moments where somebody loses their temper and maybe says something they didn't wish to say. But at that moment, if it was a put down, at that moment, the relationship is not an equal relationship. But then you go back to what you were doing, right? And when that happens, all right. So you want to look at the overall patterns in a relationship. So there's a lot more to that, but that's what the subsequent chapters are about. So those are the key points in chapter 1. Chapter 3 is equally as broad, but it's little more focused than just communication in general. So this is chapter 2 is about culture and communication. And it's important to understand that cultures are a very broad term. We have cultures that are defined by ethnicity. We have cultures that are defined by religion. We have cultures that are defined by borders. We have cultures that are defined by gender and gender-specific roles. And so, but culture is any group that identifies itself by values, language, artifacts, like flags or insignias or type of dress, etc. And we belong to multiple cultures. I belong to the grand culture of the United States, right? I also belong to the culture of Southern California. I belong to the culture of my religious upbringing. I belong to the culture of academia. I belong to the culture of my family. I am involved with the culture of my close friends and partner. And so what I'm leading to is a true interpersonal communication relationship, or a true interpersonal relationship. It becomes a culture. And that we will address that in future chapters, actually not that far away. But what I want you to understand about culture is that we belong in multiple cultures, but wherever we are, whatever the immediate interaction is, the culture that is most relevant kind of kicks in. But what happens is what culture I come from may not be the culture you come from. And in family terms, that means what I learned to value in terms of showing affection and what you learn to value in terms of showing affection may, in fact, clash. And so we will talk about some of those problems in upcoming chapters. And also what's very, very important in this chapter is the issue of gender roles. Gender roles, remember that the sex that we are, male or female, is chromosomal. We can't change that, right? That's what we're born with, the X's and Y's and the combinations thereof. Gender is socially defined. And it can change from generation to generation. It can be from region to region. It can be religious generated. But we need to understand that, there's the masculine and feminine traditional. which is the man is independent. He's the money maker. He makes the decisions. He's the strong one. And the traditional female is nurturing, more dependent, much more family oriented. Now, that's the traditional. That's what I grew up with. But when the 60s and 70s came around, we started to challenge that. But we still measure based on traditional and other, right? And so the traditional male female is, in fact, those two. It's like the Leave It to Beaver, right? And Lucille Ball, I Love Lucy. Those are the traditionals, okay? But now we have what's called androgynous. An androgyny social role has different rules. And that is, androgyny means it's okay. It's okay for a man to be nurturing, and it's okay for a woman to be the decision maker and the money maker. And so it's a blend. Androgyny means it's equally, a person equally has masculine and feminine traits. Has nothing to do with sexuality. Nothing to do with sexuality. And so where we come from a clash, let's say I was raised in a family that was traditional, so my identity as a woman is, the traditional behaviors. I start dating someone who is not, they're more androgynous. That could be a clash, because if I'm dating you, you might be expecting me, to be more involved in the decision making, more involved in, earning money. And I'm thinking, wow, how demanding of you, right? Because I have home to take care of, and we need to have, I'm the nurturer. I take care of the kids, etc. So neither is right or wrong. It's very, very important that you understand that. Neither is right or wrong. It's just the culture from which we come. And then, of course, we have the LGBTQI community, which again is, we understand that there's an element of chromosomal backing. In other words, it's not a choice. It's partly how, it's how people are born. And so we need to understand that the LGBTQ community has values as well. And the values are not all that different as the research comes out, and you'll find further in more chapters. The research is not all that different from the values of family, etc. But we need to understand that not everybody comes from the same culture. Just because I have a family and you have a family, I'm a female, you're male, it doesn't mean that we have the same standards. And that means we're going to communicate differently. All right, and I'm going to leave it at that, because the next chapters start to unfold all of those intricacies. So if you have any questions about either chapters 1 or 2, let me know. And so these 2 chapters cover the overall picture of communication and the cultures in which we communicate. And as we move into the next chapters, we'll be focusing more on individual communicators and relationships trying to be established and maintained. All right, take care.